There is a word that does not appear in any official palace statement, does not surface in any press release drafted by Royal Communications, and has not been uttered on the record by a single courtier, advisor, or family spokesperson. That word is ultimatum. And yet, according to multiple sources speaking to royal correspondents across 3 separate outlets in the final week of March 2026, that is precisely what Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie of York are now quietly navigating. An ultimatum. Not the kind that arrives in a formal letter with a palace seal. The kind that is delivered over tea in a private room, in the careful language of institutional necessity, by people who serve an institution that has survived 1,000 years precisely because it has always placed the crown above the family. This is a story about 2 women who never asked for the position they are now in. It is a story about a father whose choices are swallowing everyone around him. It is a story about a king who must protect an institution that his brother is destroying in real time. And it is a story about what loyalty actually costs when the people demanding it are not on the same side. Let's start with what happened on March 26, 2026. Because today is not just another day in the slow-moving Andrew scandal. Today is the day Tom Bower's book, Betrayal, officially goes on sale. And buried in its pages, beneath the headlines about Meghan Markle and brainwashing and confrontations at Windsor, are passages that have received almost no attention in the week since the Times excerpts began running. Passages about Beatrice and Eugenie, about how 2 women who have spent their entire adult lives threading the needle between their disgraced father and a palace that no longer wants to speak his name, are now, in the spring of 2026, facing a reckoning that cannot be deferred any further. To understand what is happening right now, you have to understand what has happened to Prince Andrew over the past 90 days. Because the pace of that collapse has accelerated in ways that even those who have followed this story closely did not fully anticipate. In early March of 2026, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese formally wrote to British Prime Minister Keir Starmer confirming that his government would support any legislative proposal to remove Prince Andrew from the royal line of succession. That letter was made public. It landed in the same news cycle as Harry and Meghan's Australia trip announcement, and so, in the press, it was somewhat overshadowed. But inside Buckingham Palace, and inside the York family home at Royal Lodge in Windsor, it was not overshadowed. It was felt. An allied Commonwealth government had gone on record, calling for a prince of the blood to be stripped of his place in succession. The last time something of that magnitude occurred in British constitutional history, it was not a scandal. It was a war. And then, 3 days later, the Times published the first Bower excerpts. And among the names that appear in those pages, alongside Harry and Meghan and Camilla and William, are Beatrice and Eugenie. Not as villains, not as heroes, as daughters, women in an impossible position. According to sources cited in Bower's account, there have been conversations at the highest levels of the palace about whether the 2 princesses need to take a public step away from their father. Not a legal step, not a constitutional one, a visible, deliberate, reputational step. A photograph that does not include him. A statement that does not mention him. An absence so calculated that the public would understand it without anyone having to say a word. Now, pause on that for a moment, because what is being described here is not an internal family argument. It is an institutional directive dressed in the language of family concern. And it is being applied to 2 women who have, by every available measure, behaved impeccably throughout one of the most sustained and damaging royal scandals in living memory. Beatrice has not given a single press interview about her father. Eugenie has not commented publicly on Epstein, on the civil settlement, on the Virginia Giuffre case, on the police investigation in the UK, on the Australian Prime Minister's letter, on any of it. They have stood by their father quietly, privately, with the kind of dignified silence that the palace has for decades held up as the gold standard of royal conduct. And now, according to these sources, that silence is no longer enough. The institution wants something more visible. Here is where the emotional mathematics of this story become almost unbearable. Beatrice York is 37 years old. She is the daughter of Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson. She is the granddaughter of the late Queen Elizabeth II. She is 11th in line to the throne. She has never been a working royal in the formal sense. She has never drawn a salary from the sovereign grant. She has built a career in private equity, married Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi in a private ceremony in 2020, and become the mother of a daughter, Sienna, now 4 years old. She has done everything that the modern monarchy has asked of peripheral royals. She has been discreet, productive, self-supporting, and steadfastly apolitical. Eugenie York is 36. She has followed a similar path, married Jack Brooksbank in 2018, 2 sons, August and Ernest, a career in the art world, a genuine philanthropic commitment through the Anti-Slavery Collective, a cause she has championed without fanfare and without speaking fees and without premium ticket pricing. Royal commentators who have been otherwise brutal in their assessments of the Windsor family's peripheral members have consistently and specifically exempted Beatrice and Eugenie from their sharpest criticism. Because there is nothing there to attack. These are 2 women who have played the game correctly, quietly, and at personal cost for years. And now, the game has changed. The source cited in reporting from the Daily Mail this week put it with the kind of bluntness that palace-adjacent commentary rarely reaches. The source said, "The girls are caught. If they stand by Andrew publicly, they make themselves toxic to an institution that has already informally blacklisted him. If they distance themselves in the way the palace appears to want, they become women who abandoned their father at the moment of his greatest vulnerability. There is no clean exit from that position. There is only the choice of which damage you are willing to live with." Read that again, because what is being described is not a PR problem. It is a moral crisis. A father and daughters on one side, an institution and a king on the other. And every precedent in modern royal history suggests that the institution wins. The institution always wins. When Edward VIII chose Wallis Simpson over the crown, the institution won. When Harry chose Meghan over the palace machinery, the institution won. When Andrew chose to give that catastrophic Newsnight interview in November 2019, the institution severed him within 24 hours. The institution won then, too. But this is different, because Beatrice and Eugenie are not being asked to choose between a romantic partner and a crown. They are not Harry, and this is not Megxit. They are being asked to publicly perform abandonment of their father in order to protect the reputation of a family that their father embarrassed, but that they did not. The moral architecture of that demand does not hold, and people close to both princesses are saying, in careful but pointed terms, that Beatrice and Eugenie know it. They see it. And the question of how they respond to it will define not just their personal lives, but their standing within an institution they have served faithfully and thanklessly for decades. Now, let us place this in the context of what Tom Bower's book actually says, because the passages about Beatrice and Eugenie are not the book's headline claim. They are not attributed to named sources. They exist in the space that royal biography always occupies, the space between the documented and the alleged. But Bauer is not a gossip columnist. He is the man who wrote acclaimed investigative biographies of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown and Richard Branson. When he writes that the palace has been quietly pressuring the York sisters to create visible distance from their father, that claim does not come from nowhere. It comes from a network of sources embedded within and adjacent to the institution that has been talking to him for the better part of 2 years. The claim may be incomplete, the sourcing may be partial, but the basic structural logic of it is irrefutable. Because of course the palace wants Beatrice and Eugenie to step back from Andrew. Of course it does. The Andrew scandal is the most radioactive ongoing story in the history of the modern British monarchy. A prince of the royal blood remains under active police investigation in the United Kingdom. A Commonwealth Prime Minister has formally called for his removal from succession. The woman who accused him of sexual assault reached a financial settlement with him that he has described as a mistake. He currently resides at Royal Lodge in Windsor, under terms negotiated with the King that both sides reportedly consider temporary. Temporary is doing a great deal of work in that sentence. Because if Andrew is eventually removed from Royal Lodge, if he is forced to decamp from the grounds of Windsor entirely, then the question of where exactly Prince Andrew lives, who funds that life, and which family members visit him becomes not a private matter, but a constitutional one. Beatrice and Eugenie visit Royal Lodge. They are documented there regularly. They bring their children. August and Sienna and Ernest know their grandfather. They have been growing up in a world where their grandfather is simultaneously a disgraced public figure and the man who pushes them on the swing set and reads them bedtime stories. That tension is not abstract for those children. It is not a newspaper headline. It is Tuesday afternoon. And here is the emotional swing that this story requires you to sit with for a moment. Because there are two entirely legitimate ways to look at what Beatrice and Eugenie are doing. One interpretation is that they are loyal daughters, daughters who understand that their father, whatever he has done, whatever he has been accused of, whatever catastrophic judgment he has demonstrated, is still their father. That love of a parent is not contingent on the parent's reputation. That standing by him in silence is not endorsing his behavior, but refusing to abandon him when no one else will. That interpretation is not naive. It is not strategically blind. It is simply human. And there are millions of people watching this story who understand it completely, because they have had their own versions of impossible family loyalty. Smaller scale versions with lower stakes, but the same moral weight. The second interpretation is harder and more institutional. It says that Beatrice and Eugenie are grown women with children of their own, and that the continued proximity to Andrew is not just personally uncomfortable, but actively damaging to the monarchy that those children will one day inherit. In name, if not in title. That the late Queen protected this institution through 1,000 crises, precisely because she knew that sentiment and duty are not the same thing. That King Charles, who loved his mother and has spent 50 years watching her make those brutal calculations, now faces the same calculus. And that the request being made of Beatrice and Eugenie, as painful as it is simply the institution doing what institutions do to survive. Both of those interpretations are true simultaneously. That is what makes this story devastating rather than merely dramatic. Now let us talk about what is actually at stake for these two women in practical terms. Because this is not just about family feeling. This is about their position within a monarchy that is currently undergoing the most significant structural review of its public-facing role in decades. King Charles has made clear since his accession that the working institution will shrink. Fewer working royals, more focused public engagement, less peripheral noise. In that context, where exactly do Beatrice and Eugenie stand? They are not working royals, they never have been, but they carry royal titles. They bear the Windsor name, and they appear at major ceremonial events. They represent a category that the monarchy has never fully resolved. Too royal to be fully private, not royal enough to have official standing. Harry and Meghan found that contradiction unlivable and detonated it publicly. Beatrice and Eugenie have found it merely uncomfortable and managed it privately. But the Andrew scandal has collapsed that middle ground. Because now every photograph of Beatrice and Eugenie at Royal Lodge is a potential headline. Every family Christmas becomes a tabloid decision tree. Every appearance with their father is a signal that the palace reads one way and that Andrew's remaining supporters read another. A senior royal commentator speaking to a British broadcaster this week made the point that nobody in official communication will make directly. She said, "The issue is not whether Beatrice and Eugenie love their father. Of course they do. The issue is that the British taxpayer, through the mechanisms of the state, provides security, ceremonial resources, and institutional recognition to members of this family. And the question of which family members that recognition extends to, and under what conditions, is a question that cannot be answered by loyalty alone. It has to be answered by accountability. And Andrew has not been accountable. He has been litigated, settled, quietly managed, and expensively housed. And his daughters are being asked to decide whether they are part of that managed situation or part of the institution that is trying to survive it. That is where today, March 26, 2026, sits in this story. Tom Bower's book is on the shelves. The Australian Prime Minister's letter is in the diplomatic record. The police investigation in the United Kingdom is ongoing. Royal Lodge negotiations are reportedly entering a decisive phase. And somewhere in Windsor or in London or in one of the private residences where this family does its hardest thinking, Beatrice and Eugenie are navigating a question that no one has ever had to navigate in quite this form before. The late Queen never had to publicly choose between a disgraced son and the crown she wore. She managed both, in silence, with a discipline that was read by many as coldness and by others as the clearest possible evidence of what the job actually demands. She is gone now. King Charles wears the crown, and the discipline required to wear it is landing on the shoulders of two women who never asked for it, never earned a penny from it, and cannot escape its weight simply by living their lives quietly in Windsor and London, and doing everything that was ever asked of them. There is still no public statement from Beatrice. There is still no public statement from Eugenie. There is still no official confirmation that any conversation of the kind described in Bower's book has taken place. Buckingham Palace, as it always does in situations like this, has declined to comment. That silence is the palace's oldest and most deliberate communication strategy. But silence, as this story has made plain over and over again, is never actually neutral. It is a position, and the position it is holding right now, in the last week of March 2026, is one of the most morally complicated the British monarchy has ever been asked to defend. Andrew is their father, the institution is their inheritance, and the man who holds the crown is their uncle. Those three facts have been held in uneasy balance for 6 years. The question that Bower's book and the Australian Prime Minister's letter and the police investigation and the Royal Lodge negotiations are all converging to force is how much longer that balance can hold, and what it costs two daughters when it finally does not. No one in Montecito is watching this story. No cameras will be there for this particular reckoning. There is no Netflix deal, no speaking fee, no retreat ticket, no Instagram post waiting at the other end of this decision. There is only the weight of a choice that arrives not with a press release, but in a quiet room, with family, with no good answer, and with the full, impossible gravity of what it means to be born into a family that is also an institution, and to discover, in the most personal way possible, that the institution does not blink.